Hello guys, welcome back. And in previous video we saw how we can write custom error handler. Also we saw what is middleware function and how we can work with that. Moreover, we also learned how we can debug our Golang application and fix the real-time issues, right? We also learned about error handling and error formatting and exposing only the required message which client needs. Finally, we have tested our application and APIs by triggering create user and login APIs from the Postman, which is a client in our case. So now we have login API there in place, and in this video we are going to design our client view application, which is going to internally use Ionic framework as well. So we'll just start with login page so that we can integrate login API basically, which we have created in Golang. We should be able to call login API from our application. In the previous video, what we used is Postman to trigger the request to test the APIs, right? But that API should have integrated with our application so that the login functionality should work fine for our application. We'll learn a lot of concepts in Vue.js, and we'll start all those concepts from very basics. And then we'll run Vue Interceptor, Vuex, and the app, how we can manage our application state using Vuex, right? So let's go back to code, and then this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the Golang application, since we have already created those API and we have that API in our hand. Later on, if we need more API, of course we'll be coming back to server, and henceforth we'll create all those APIs which is required, and then certain functionalities will create in the server. But as of now, I'm just going to open the client folder, and we have to do a lot of work on client as well, right? We need to create a login page in the client itself. So for that, what I'm going to do is very first thing what I'm going to do here is I will be giving a very short introduction about Vue.js, and then I will proceed with the very very basic concept of the Vue.js, how it will work and how we are going to design our application. Vue.js is nothing but it is a framework. It is Vue Ionic framework, which basically we can use this Vue Ionic together to. It's not Vue Ionic, actually Ionic framework we are going to use, and with Ionic we can use Vue.js, React.js as well as Angular, right? So this all three is nothing but a framework to JavaScript framework to create an application. What does framework means? Framework is nothing but a structured basically we have a structured library present, lot of functionality present over there so that we don't need to create everything from scratch based on the JavaScript. So we are going to use this framework, and it has all those capabilities. And why Vue.js? Because Vue.js is a lightweight framework, and nowadays Vue.js is gaining a lot of popularity because of its lightweight nature, and we don't have any issue with the memory leak. And what is memory leak? You can of course go and search it. What is memory leak? But for your information, memory leak is nothing but if your application is utilizing very high memory every time, because of that your application may hang or goes down. That is called memory leak. So in Vue.js we are not going to see that, of course, because Vue.js is lightweight, and Vue.js is handling memory in an efficient way, right? So then parallelly we have React.js as well. React.js is not a framework, it's a library actually. For making application in React.js, we should have a lot of third-party package, or the package which is maintained by React.js itself. We should have integrated that additionally, right? That's why I'm not going to use React.js in this example, because it is going to be again long video. But if you guys want it to be in React.js as well, I can make a video on that and I can upload it whenever you want. So next we were talking about Vue.js. So Vue.js is of course lightweight, and then we have certain concepts in Vue.js, not in Vue.js, but if we talk about the application, whole application, there is very basic concept. Like if we'll consider this, I'll go back to, let's say, the application here, and here if I will say every component, not component, everything which we are showing on UI, which we are seeing on UI, we can consider those as a component. It's a small component, and there can be any number of components which combine together and make the whole page, right? and the component design, which of course we are going to do, which make our page much beautiful, right? For that I'm going to use css, raw css over here. You can use any one of your choice. You can use bootstrap, or you can use the tailwind, nowadays gaining popularity. So that is completely based on you, but for this tutorial I'm going to use raw css, since we don't need to make it more beautiful. This is just for tutorial purpose. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a small reusable component in Vue.js, so that we can reuse it on our application. We can reuse it on our UI and make our code much easier and modular, right? So what we are going to do next is we are going to learn the concept of creating component from scratch, and what exactly component is, right? So internally what we are going to use is we are going to use Ionic framework, and we are going to use each and every, not each and every, but most of the component we are going to use take from Ionic framework, and we'll just create a wrapper of our Vue.js component, and then we are going to use it. Why is it that so? Because we'll centralize all those components in our application, so that based on, for example, if we want to, let's say, do certain kind of functionality on a button, right? So that button is going to be imported from our component, not the actual Vueonic component. Later on, for example, let's say we want to change that view ionic to something else, right? We are going to use a different kind of framework or different framework library to create the UI. We will just need to modify those functionality, but not the actual component of our application. It will be there as it is, so we don't have to worry much about changing the code. We'll just change it at single place and everything it will be changed. That's why we are going to follow this concept, and you can say it as a kind of abstraction. We are going to abstract that view ionic, and we are going to wrap it inside our view component, which we are going to create from scratch. So that is much about this, and without talking much, I'm going to create a folder structure over here. What I will do is I will just create a couple of folder over here. Very first thing what I'm going to create is, of course, it is going to be a store which is going to use which is going to be used when we are going to manage our application state, right? First thing what I'm going to do here is I will just close all this, so that it will be looking as a fresh, right? And then I will be having component, of course. Very first thing which we are going to do is we are going to do create a components. So I will create a components folder over here, and then I will be creating views is already there. Views is nothing but it is going to be an exact page, and then we will be using all those components inside the page. All right, so a couple of more folder I'm going to create here is I'm going to create service, which will be responsible for sharing the reusable piece of code, and it is going to be, of course, JavaScript, since we are following JavaScript over here. And then couple of more method more folder I'm going to create here. I'm going to create, you can say, I'm going to create router. I think router is there as well, right? So for now we need this much of folder over here, but we need file as well. So in Vue, how we are going to create component, we'll see that here. First thing what we need is we need a button, right? So for that what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the component with name app button dot view, and each file of the view should have the extension dot view. So throughout the component I will be following the Pascal casing over here. You can follow the casing you want, but it is basically a convention that for component we are going to use Pascal casing. If you want to use kebab casing as well, you can use that. That is not going to be an issue. I'm going to follow this Pascal casing, and here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a very first component, very first reactive element, you can say, in Vue.js, but internally it will just wrap over the Ionic framework. For that, what I'm going to do here is I will just use template. And for those, if you don't want what template is, in Vue we are following SFCs. And what does that mean? SFCs is nothing but single file component. We are SFC. So it's going to be a single file component. That means a single file is responsible for certain types of design or certain types of behavior. So all the thing, or not all the things, but all the design that is going to be of either Vue, Ionic, or the custom element, HTML element, has to be there inside the template. So the template is going to be basically say what your design look like. Okay. And next we'll have one more section over here. Since we know the concept of SFC, Vue is single file component. So here what we can say is script, and then script will be there, right? And finally we can also say style over here, and then style. So here we can remove CSS. Of course we are going to use CSS. So but one thing we are going to put here is scope. That means any style which we are going to write here, any custom style CSS, that will be specific to this particular component or this particular page. It won't affect the other page, or it won't affect any other component. All right, that is why we are going to put a scope. If I'll remove this scope, that means it is going to affect the whole application wherever we are going to use that specific CSS design, right? So I'll just save it, and basically from here we are going to start designing. Very first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to Vue Ionic website, and from there we can see what all component present over there and how we can use that. So if you want to go on Vue here, Vue Ionic framework, so okay, you can see here, and you will be clicking on this component, and here you can see all those components listed over there. So this time I'm going to create app button. So I want to wrap a button inside this app button so that we can use it everywhere in the program. So this way we are going to use the iron button, right? What I'm going to do here is I'm going to write iron button, and I'm going to use it as a kebab casing, which is recommended from the Vue Ionic framework. So here what I'm going to do, okay, I have used this component over here. This is how we are going to use the component, right? Even though we are going to create the app button component, right? So if we are going to use this app component button, we are going to use in the same way. So this is how we are going to use component. And next thing what I'm going to do is I need a class over here. What this class will do, it will actually add the CSS class, and based on the CSS class, the respective design will get added. But you can see here question mark. What does this question mark actually means, right? This question mark means this class is going to be dynamic. That means we can dynamically modify our class somewhere from the program, right? So we can say class, and then here we can say style class, and how this style class is being referenced here. For that, very first thing what I'm going to do is I'm just going to export this file, export default. If you guys are aware of Vue options API, if you're not aware of, you can see here how we are going to do that. So for creating a Vue component or creating a Vue page, very first thing we need to define the template. That's what we learned. And then we should have a script over there, and then the style. But this is completely optional. Why? Because there might be a design where these things are not necessary. We don't need any functionality over there, so we don't need this, but still a script should be there so that we can able to see what exact name of the component. So here first thing what we are going to do is we are going to define the name, and then I'm going to call it app button. All right, and then we are going to follow this kind of code structure throughout our program. Okay, and then we saw how we can use Ionic framework and its component over here, right? So before using component, what we need to do is we just need to import it from the Ionic framework. And how we are going to do that? Of course, we can import that ion button. And how I know that? You can go here inside this documentation, and then you can find that over here. This is the component TS file, and this for Angular, I believe. But if I'll click view, I should be able to see all those code related to view. You can see here, this is how I'm going to import the file. So I'll just click copy and then I'll paste it over here, since we need the same kind of functionality over here. And then we have just imported this ion button. We don't need ion icon as of now. I will remove that. And here, whenever we define any component or whenever we import any component from anywhere, in Vue.js, in Options API, what we are going to say is you just need to register this on the Vue instance. How we are going to do that? We are going to use components object over here, and all those component which we have imported, we need to register that over here. So I'll just put iron button, and then you can see here it turns green. That means this has been imported successfully. And if we'll hover on that, we can see that it is going to be of type iron button there, right? That's cool. And then finally what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one more thing in this button, is iron spinner. All right, why I'm going to add that? Just to show if you have clicked some button and there's some action which is being performed, so it will just show the rotation spinners, so that we can know that okay, this button has been clicked and some action is being performed, right? So I'll just click save on it, and then I need couple of props over here. And what does prop means? Prop is nothing, it is a way of passing the data from the parent to child, right? That means wherever this component we are going to use, we are going to pass certain data to this component so that this component work in a specific way, right? For example, let's say we are going to use this app button on a login page. So there should be a title associated with that button, there should be color associated with that button, right? There should be spinner running based on certain functionality. So all that data should be coming from where? That all data should be coming from outside of this component where we are going to use that. Again, this is going to be a concept of injection, dependency injection. We are just creating this app button component, and then we'll use it anywhere. It's kind of reusability as well, and then we'll inject all those required functionality over in this component, and it will work accordingly. So we know that what is props is nothing but it's a way of passing those data. So I will write props here, and then it is going to be of type object again. So in basically in Options API in Vue.js, everything is going to be in object notation, so that is very easy to maintain, since we all know JavaScript is basically more focused on JSON object, right? So that's why we are choosing Options API over here, and this is how the big application works. So props here, what are the functionalities we need, or what are the properties? It's nothing but a small form of properties. So I need the ID which is to be associated with this button, right? For that I'm going to assign ID as well, and we know that how we can. There's two ways we can just directly define ID over here, ID something, right? But this is the hard-coded way. Every time we are going to use this button, so this button is going to be of type ID, ng, dd, id. Let's say if we have 10, 20 button in a page, right? So all of their ID is going to be the same, but that is not the expectation, since that is going to be duplicate. ID should always be unique. So this ID should be actually dynamic, right? For making it dynamic, or just to bind the property dynamically, what we are going to use is we are just going to put this colon in front of this property, and then the variable name we are going to pass over here, which is coming from the prop. So I'll just type ID. Now this ID is going to be binded over here, and the ID we are going to inject from somewhere in the program where we are going to use this app button, right? That's cool. So now this ID, we can do also one thing. This ID should be of certain types. We can define the types as well. We can say this ID is going to be type string, and default it is going to be empty, right? And next what we are going to do is we need the button title as well. So we are going to do the same thing. We need a string, right? And then is going to be default is not going to be there, since we need this title at every cost, because the button should show some title, right? So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to accept the style class as well, so that we can be able to bind this class dynamically. Basically we should be able to pass style dynamically, and it will just bind it over here. So here what I can say is style class, right? And then type is of course going to be of type string, and if it is not there, means default empty will be assigned. So next what we need is, here we need spinner name. Why we need spinner name is because we'll see that in action. So here what I need is spinner, right? So spinner name I'll say, and default is going to be bubbles. It's going to be of type string once more, and then the default is going to be bubbles. So we have couple of spinners name there, and how we can find that, we'll just go over there and then we can find out those spinners here, all those spinners. It's not there, but we should be able to see somewhere, since we are going to use a spinner, right? So we should search for ion spinner. Let me just search for ion spinner. Ion spinner. It's not there. Let me just search for spinner. It is there. And where it is? Here. So I'll just go in ion spinner, and then here we can find out all those spinner which we want, right? So I need this kind of spinner over there. The name of this is bubbles. That's the same I'm going to use over here, bubbles. If you want other spinner as well, you can use other spinner as well. You can just play around with this data. All right. So next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to use action, which is going to be of course method. Type is going to be a function, and it can be a synchronous function, or the synchronous function required is going to be, let's say, true, because the button should perform certain functionality. Every button should perform certain functionality, or else there's no need for defining a button, right? Now this action is going where? This action is going to execute somewhere. We'll see that. And then we need one more thing over here. Why I'm going to feed that things here? Because let's say we are going to trigger a button, and we have couple of more button over the screen, that all has to be disabled, right? For on this button click, how we are going to do that? So we are going to say, okay, you just give me all those dependent IDs, so that we can, based on those IDs, we can disable all those buttons. And then once the functionality has been executed successfully, we are going to release those buttons. So for that we are going to say dependent IDs to be blocked, right? And is going to be of type, of course, array of string. So we can say like is going to be a type, and here we can say it's going to be of type array, and the default is of course going to be empty. We don't want any button to be blocked by default, but of course this button ID is going to be blocked by default. And next thing what we need is, of course, we need this ion spinner as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to register ion spinner here as well. Next I'm going to bind certain functionality over here. What I'm going to do is so on click of this button, what should happen, that I'm going to define here. You can put this click on any of the if any of the input elements, right? If it is an input element, you can bind this click. So how we can bind this? We can say @ and click then equals to Then here we are going to define a method name on button click, let's say. And where we are going to define this function, we'll just copy it here, and we are going to just outside of this props we are going to put comma, and then here we are going to say methods, right? So here we are going to define those methods, and this method will do nothing, but what it will do is it will just say, okay, this is going to be an asynchronous function, okay, and then this function is going to say await execute the action. So how we are going to access this action, we are going to use this keyword and then action, right? Now this is going to execute those actions, and then it will work accordingly. Now by default what we will do is we'll pass that dependent IDs to be blocked as well, so that if we need this anywhere in the program we can use that. So by default I will be passing this to this action function. So wherever we are going to pass this action function in the first parameter, that function is going to receive this as well, right? So now what I'm going to do here is on button click, this function will get triggered. One more thing we need here is we need to disable this button, and it should be disabled on certain condition. So I'm going to say disabled, and it's going to be of type boolean. It's going to be of type boolean, but we are not going to define it here. We are going to say this in the computed property. So now for those who don't know what is computed property, of course if you are new to Vue.js, computed property is nothing but it is going to be reactive value. Whenever your application, whenever your component re-renders, right? Re-renders means whenever there's change on UI, if this key, if this computed property is binded to the specific design, it will get triggered automatically, and then it will calculate all those values which is present inside the computed function, right? So it is not going to be a function, of course it's going to be an object, and then here we are going to say, for example, disabled. It's going to be a function, of course, but when we are going to use it, we are not going to use this particular thing over here, function notation. We are just simply going to copy this, and here we'll say, okay, if this condition gets true, just bind this value or the button will get disabled. Not disabled equals to, now this value has been binded to this disabled, and if disabled is true, then of course this function, this button is going to be disabled. And how we can do that, we can just say return, okay, we can say true for now, right? This button will get default disabled, but we are just going to make it false. Before that, what we can do is we can make one data variable here. So for data variable, we are going to create what? We are going to create it as like a function, and then from inside data variable, we are going to return this object. So whatever variable we are going to define here is also going to be reactive, but this will present across this particular component. So if you guys are having any problem understanding this concept, you feel free to reach out to me, or you can put down your comment in the comment section. I will address all those issues as early as possible. So for the time being, I'm going to use is disabled, is button disabled, let's say it's going to be a false, and then here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to return is button disabled. Why I did that? Because computed, whatever the property which we are going to define inside the computed is always going to be a getter, it is not going to be a setter, because component property is not made to change. It will just return some values based on the calculation. Why it is made? Because it will be very reactive. As soon as our UI changes, it should trigger automatically, it should trigger as early as possible, and then it will calculate all those values which is present inside its functions. So, but since we know we cannot change this variable, for that we are going to maintain this is button disabled variable over here, and then by default we are going to say it as a false, right? And then we can modify this variable based on this variable. This will get triggered, and then the respective button template will get disabled or enabled. So what we can do here is we can say this dot is button disabled equals to true. As soon as the button is clicked, this will get disabled, and then once the functionality has been executed successfully, we'll just say is button disabled equals to false. So we'll just release the disability of the button, and then it will be back to the normal state. This is what we did so far here. So we learned how we are going to create a template, how we are going to use a script, how we can import any component, and then if we are going to import any of the component, then we need to register that inside the components object. This you need to learn it, you need to memorize it. This is how we are going to do. This is just the process. There's no rocket science here, there's no logical things over here. We just need to remember, okay, we need to register this component inside the component. And then the props also we need. Props is nothing but it is the way of passing data, whatever data we need. Like in function, how we are calling the function, right? We are going to call this function, and then in the parentheses we are going to pass the argument. The same way we are going to pass the props over here. Wherever we want to use this app button, we'll pass certain types of props here, properties here, so that based on the property it will perform certain functionality which we are expecting, right? And then data, this data is going to be nothing, it is going to be a function which will return an object, and this object will contain all those variables which we are going to use on this specific component or this specific page, you can say. Then we'll have this computed. Computed is nothing but it's a collection of property. We can have n number of property defined here with the separated comma. All right. And why we are going to use this computed property? Because every time the respective template changes or UI changes, it will get triggered automatically, and then it will reflect the latest value. This is how Vue is going to be very reactive, and this is how Vue is going to maintain the virtual DOM. If you guys are not aware of what is virtual DOM is nothing but it is a virtual model of document object, right? What it will do is it will get placed on top of actual DOM. When we are going to change anything on the DOM, it is going to get manipulated on the virtual DOM, which is very fast as respect to DOM. Anything which we are going to perform, any modification on actual DOM, that is going to take time, and that is going to take time to reflect the changes. That's why Vue put a virtual DOM in front of actual DOM, and this way Vue maintains reactivity as well as Vue maintains its fast how we can execute that. Now next thing what we are going to see is methods. All those functionalities which has to be there on this component should be defined inside the method object. You can see it's nothing but a plain JavaScript method, and then we are whatever we want to do inside this functionality we can do. But one thing to remember here is anything which we want to use on this methods, or if we want to use this in a computed property, we should be accessing all those properties or methods or props. We should be, if we are going to use options API, we should be able to access that using this keyword, or else it is going to be defined. This means nothing. It is going to refer to this context, this particular app button context. So this particular app button context have props as well as is button disabled, and we have a lot of method there. We have computed property as well there. So now this how we are going to use this computed property. We are going to use this computed property just by name itself here. Even if it is going to be method, you can see we no need to use this over here. We don't want, Vue is saying you don't need to use this. Even though if we are going to use this over here, it's not going to give any error, but we can omit that completely, since that is not required at all. It's completely optional. So this is how we are going to create any of the Vue component from scratch. All right. And then similar to this, we will be making a lot of component which we are going to use across our application. Next we are going to create app icon button, and then we'll see app input. which we are going to use throughout our application. We'll be building a lot of components, of course, but for this video, this is it. We just created one app button component, and if you want to see it in action, I'll show that over here. Let me show it to you, but before that I forgot to mention title over here. Since we passed title, we need to, okay, any title which we want to dynamically show it to here. How we can do that? We'll just need to write this, you can say double curly braces, and inside that the value which we need to write. So here what I'm going to bind is I'm going to bind the title over here, and from where this title is coming, this title will be coming from the props, right? So next thing is, of course, after title we should have ion spinner, which we have registered. So this is how I'm going to use the ion spinner component, and in that ion spinner we should have certain name, right? We saw that in documentation, like which kind of a spinner we want, so we need to specify the spinner name. And then this spinner should only be showing if our button is not disabled, right? If our button is if our button is disabled, then only we are going to show this spinner. That means certain action is being performed on this button. So how we can do that? We need a condition over here, right? In Vue.js, we have a lot of directives like vif, velse, velsif. So that is called directive. Using that, we can integrate that in our template and then perform certain functionalities over there. So for that, I'm going to use vif directives, right? Vif directives, and then I'm going to put condition over here. What I'll put is, if is disabled, then only this spinner should be there, showing there inside button, or else it won't show at all. Now I'll save it. I'm done with this app button component. I will go back here in the app and I'll show you how it works. So I'll just go in view page. Here I'm going to use that app button component, and how I can do that is I'll just import those. Okay, so here we can see a lot of component has been imported, but it is not being used. So for that, what I'll do here is I will very first thing what we are going to do is export default, right? And then we are going to name this component. In this case, it is home page, of course, right? Home page. In the later video, we are going to remove all these things and we are going to start everything from scratch, creating all those pages from scratch. And of course, we have created one component. So here how in the previous section we know that how we can register the component on Vue.js. We can create a component object over here, and then here we need to register all those component which has been imported over the top. I'll just copy it and paste it over here. We need one more component over here, that is app button, which we saw. Now this is the way we can import the component, you can see, but we are not going to follow this dot symbol here. Instead, we are going to follow @ notation, so that it will just refer to src directly. We don't have to give relative path. All right, but we'll replace that later. First, I'm going to just register this component so that we can use it on our template, right? So here what I'll do is I'll just register our app button component, and how we are going to use that app button component. Of course, we need to use it as like this. So this is how we are going to use app button component, but this time we are going to use kebab casing. So anywhere which we are going to use this component button, or any custom component or any component, will be using in kebab casing. All right, if I'll hover on this, you can see that these all are the property which is expected inside app button, and then we have lot more there which we can of course go inside this button and see. So here very first thing what I will be passing over here is it needs to be there need to be a title, right? That is mandatory. So what I'll pass here is click me, for example, right? And then I'll click save, and let's see that in action. I'll go back to terminal. I'll just go inside client folder and run that application. Client, right? I'll put Ionic serve over here. This should be starting our application. Okay, again this is throwing some security issue. For that, what I'll do is I'll just open this application in a command terminal. How we can do that? I will just open this, and then here I'm going to type cmd. So a command prompt will open here, and then I'll go in client folder. Right here I'll do Ionic serve. Right, it will start our application as expected. So let's wait a couple of seconds, and we should be expecting everything should work fine. You can see the application is being started. It will take some time initially, and then it will build sequentially in very low, in very basically it will load very faster. So you can see here identifier app button has already been declared on home page.view. How we can debug that? We'll just go back to the file. We are seeing that error, right? App button. So you can see we have two import over there. We will just remove one import from here. I'll just click save and go back to website, and then I'll just click refresh. You can see that cool button here, right? Click me. And from where this click me is coming, of course, we are using that component on this page, and then we can pass the props, title props, then based on title prop it is showing over there. This is how we are going to create a component. This is how we are going to create a reusable component in Vue.js. And how you can do that, you just need to practice it so that you can make it more robust and you can remember it, right? So that is it for this video, guys, and I will meet you in the next videos. But before that, I want to show you how that loader is going to be shown there, right? For that, what I'm going to do here is I will just add certain delay for the execution of this action, so that we can see, okay, this loader is showing there. For that, what I'll do is set timeout. I'll put this functionality in set timeout. All right, and then I'll pause, let's say 6000 millisecond. That means this function will get executed after 6000 millisecond, and for 6000 millisecond, that is nothing but the 6 second. For 6 second we are going to show this loader, and then we'll just close this loader. For that, what I'm going to do here is I'll just disable that inside that set timeout function, and then let me save it. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to, this is fine, I'll do nothing. I'll just go back here. I'll just click on refresh, and then once I'll click this should get disabled, and it should show some loader, and after 6 seconds this loader should go away. Let me click on it. You can see there's loader loading, and this button is disabled. You won't be able to click it anymore, but after this 6 seconds it should be working as before. You can see here even after 6 seconds it's not getting enabled. Why? Because we need to see whether we get some error. This dot action is not a function, right? So of course we have not passed any action to this button, but here we can see this action is getting executed, right? For that, what we can do is we can pass action over here. And how we can pass action? Of course we can say action equals to, and then we can, okay, we need action, right? That is going to be of type function, of course, and then we can say this. I'm just going to put console log over here, and I'm going to put button clicked. All right, I'll just save it and go back here. I'll just refresh this page. Once more, I'll just click on click me, and you can see this is getting loaded, and after 6 seconds that method should be triggered. You can see that button get clicked over here, that message we are getting, which we paused over as a function in action. And then this functionality is working fine since it's getting reverted to the previous state. That is how a component works. That is how we are going to create component across our application. Once again, you can go through all of these component, and then you can see how you are going to create the component. I will put all this code, I'll commit this code and put inside the GitHub, so you can import that GitHub code, you can download that GitHub code and see each line of code how we are going to make this. All right, thank you guys. We'll meet in the next video, and we'll see a lot more. We'll create a lot of more component which we are going to use across our application. We'll build a new model, we'll build a new pop-up which will show on UI. That all we'll see in the upcoming videos. Thank you, goodbye.